ושמו אחד, לשם ולתפארת ולתהילה. לך, דודי, לך, דודי, לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לך, דודי, לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לקראת שבת לכו ונלכה, כי היא מקור הברכה, מראש מקדם ניסוחה, סוף מעשה במחשבה תחילה. לך, דודי, לך, דודי, לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לך, דודי, לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. מקדש מלך עיר מלוכה, קומי צאי מתוך ההפכה, רב לך שבט בעמק הבכה, והוא יחמו עלייך חמלה. לך, דודי, לך, דודי, לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לך, דודי, לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה.
We continue on page 25 at the second verse.
ימין ושמאל תפרוצי, ואת אדוני תעריצי, על יד איש בן פרצי, ואני שמחה ונגילה. לך, דודי, לך, דודי, לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לך, דודי, לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה.
I invite you to rise and face the door as we symbolically welcome our Sabbath Queen.
בואי ושלום, העטרת בעלה, גם בשמחה ובצוף עולה, תוך אמוני עם סגולה, בואי חלה, בואי חלה. לך, דודי, לך, דודי, לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לך, דודי, לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה.
You may be seated. Thank you, Zach. We continue on page 27 with the Psalm for Shabbat.
מזמור שיר ליום משפט, טוב להודות לאדוני, לזמר שיר ליום
We'll join together on page 28 at the red arrow.
צדיק אתה יפרח כארז בלבנון, יזכה שתולים בבית אדוני, בחצרות אלוהינו יפריחו עוד ינובון בסבע, דשנים ורעננים יהיו להגיד, ישר אדוני צורי צורי ולא עוולה תבוא.
We turn now to page 39, and hopefully you've had your chance to kind of settle in and really prepare for Shabbat to begin, because on page 39 we officially move into our evening service, and I invite you to rise again if you're comfortable and able to do so for Baruch Hu. Baruch Adonai HaMorach Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai HaMorach Le'olam Va'ed.
You may be seated.
ומעביר יום ומימין לילה, מבדיל בין יום ובין לילה, אדוני צבאות, שמו אל חי וקיים, תמיד ימלוך עלינו ללמד ברוך אדוני, אמרים הרבים.
Continue on the top of page 40.
אהבת עולם את ישראל, עמך אהבת, תורה ומצוות, חוקים ומשפטים, אותנו לימדת. כן אדוני אלוהינו, בשוכבנו ובקומנו, נשיח בחוקיך, נשמח בדברי תורתך, ובמצוותיך לעולם ועד. יהם חיינו ואורך ימינו, ואורך ימינו, ובהם נהיה יומם ולילה, יומם ולילה. ידך תציר ממנו לעולמים, ברוך אדוני אוהב עמו ישראל.
We turn to the top of page 41 for Shema and Via Hafta, and I'd love to invite Molly to come up to help lead with her brother Zach, at least the beginning of this experience. And knowing the entire Via Hafta is a little challenging, but hopefully Molly can assist us with our first line here.
Share the stool with your brother. Ready? Here we go. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. V'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha, bechol levacha, ubechol nafshecha, ubechol miodecha, v'hayu הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך וקשרתם לאות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך.
We continue silently on page 42. Thank you, Seagulls.
That's why we don't sing songs. Adonai Elohechem emet.
We continue together on the top of page 44.
ומלכותו ברצון קיבלו עליהם משה ומרים בני ישראל אחד אשר בשמחה רבה ויאמרו כולם מי כמוך באלים אדוני מי כמוך נדר בקודש נורא תהילה לו ספר מלכותך רובנך בקיים לפני משה זה אלינו ויאמרו אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד נאמר יוודע אדוני את יעקב וגולם יהיה חזק ממנו ברוך אתה אדוני ישראל.
Amen. We turn to page 45 for Hashkivenu, our evening prayer for peace and protection. And in a moment, we will sing together 3 lines up from the bottom in both the Hebrew and the transliteration. Ufros aleinu sukat shlomecha. May you spread over us your canopy of peace. This invitation to protect us, no matter where we are or where we go, the feeling of kind of being wrapped up in a shelter of peace. And as we sing these words, I encourage you to hold in your mind and in your hearts anyone anywhere who might be in need of a little extra peace and protection tonight. And so maybe it's someone who needs a place to go now that the weather is a little bit cold again. Or maybe we're thinking about the parts of the world where there's a lot of strife and a lot of unrest, thinking about those who are still held hostage in Gaza and those who are in the midst of war. We send these prayers out to all those who are in need. And if you are finding yourself in need of a little bit of extra peace and protection, then I invite you to take that in for yourself as well.
Ufros aleinu sukat shalom lecha. Ufros aleinu sukat shalom lecha. Baruch Adonai, haborei sukat shalom aleinu v'el kol mo Yisrael v'el Yerushalayim.
We turn to the top of page 46, and Zach will help lead us in Vishamru.
Vishamru
B'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat Lasot et ha-Shabbat Ledoratam Barit Olam Beini uvein b'nei Yisrael Oti leolam Oti leolam Oti leolam Vishamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat Lasot et ha-Shabbat Ledoratam Barit Olam Hi sheshet yamim asa Adonai et ha-shamayim v'et ha'aretz v'shamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat Lasot et ha-Shabbat Ledoratam Barit Olam Uvayom hashvi'i Shabbat vayinafash Shabbat vayinafash Shabbat vayinafash V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat Lasot et ha-Shabbat Ledoratam Barit Olam.
We continue in the middle of page 46.
Yikara v'yikara shemei rabba
Amen.
v'yamla divar kirute v'yamlich malchute
V'chayechon uvyomechon u'chayei dechol Beit Yisrael Bagala Ubizman Kariv Imaru Amen Yehesh me Rabba Mevarach V'yalam U'liyamei Almaya Yibarach
Yibarach v'yishtabat v'yipa'ar v'yitrama v'yitnaseh v'yitada v'yitaleh v'yitala shemei dekudesha
Brechu.
le'ela min kol birchuta v'shirata
Tush Bechata V'nechemata Tamiran Bilma
v'imeru
Amen. We turn to page 47, and I invite you to rise for the silent Amidah. In the evening, we move through this prayer on our own, which begins on page 47 and concludes on page 52. And so I'll invite you to take some time to move through the Siddur in Hebrew or in English or with some of the commentary or poetry on the sides, or to take a quiet moment for yourself, and we'll come all back together on page 52. Conclude with a prayer for peace.
Say shalom yimramav, say shalom aleinu, be'al Yisrael, v'imru amen. Say shalom, say shalom, shalom aleinu, be'al Yisrael, say shalom, say shalom. Shalom aleinu v'yakol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom. Shalom aleinu v'yakol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom. Shalom aleinu v'yakol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom. Shalom aleinu v'yakol Yisrael. V'yimaru.
We turn to page 53, and I invite you to rise again if you are comfortable and able to do so.
Vayechulu hashamayim v'haaretz v'chol tzevam Vayechal Elohim bayom hashvi'i melachto asher asa Vayishbot bayom hashvi'i mikol melachto asher asa Vayevarech Elohim et yom hashvi'i Vayikadesh oto Kivlo Shabbat mikol melachto Asher bara Elohim la'asot Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei avotenu ve'imotenu Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol, Ha'gibor v'Hanora, El Elyon, Konei Shamayim va'aretz. Magen Avot Bidvaro, Mechaye Metim B'ma'amaro, Ha'el HaGadosh She'en Kamohu, Hameniach Le'amo, B'yom Shabbat Kodsho, Kivam Ratzah Le'haniach Lahem, Kivam Ratzah Le'haniach Lahem, Lefanav Na'avod B'yira Ufachad, V'nodeh Lishmo B'chol Yom Tamid, Me'od HaBrachot. El HaHodaot, Adon HaShalom, Megadesh HaShabbat, Mevarech Shemi, Umeniach B'Kedusha, Le'amidu Shnei Oneg, Zecher Lema'aseh Bereshit.
Page 54.
Eloheinu v'Elohei Avotenu v'Imotenu Ritzei v'Imnuchatenu Kadeshenu b'mitzvotecha v'ten chalkeinu b'toratecha Sabinu mituvecha v'samchenu b'shuatecha v'taher libeinu li'ovdecha be'emet v'hanchilenu Adonai Eloheinu b'ahava uvratzon Shabbat kodshecha v'yanuchu v'Yisrael mekadeshei shemecha baruch atah Adonai mekadesh ha-Shabbat.
Continue with Kaddish Shalem.
Yiravi Yirashmi Rabba, Miyamadi Brachner Tevim, Mikmachu Tevachai Chanuvim, Echonuvchai Gobe Yisrael, Bagalazman Kurivimru, Amen, Yishmi Rabba Mevarach, Lialam Liamei Amaya Yitbarach, Yitbarach Vishtabach, Yitbarach Rami in the Savior, the Darvit Levi Talash, Mirusha Brichu, Ni Elam Miko Berchata Vishurat, Jush Bechata Vinachamata, Damia Rami Amaviru, Amen. Take about Salud Hun, Uviyutakon to Israel. Kodam, Abahonu Bishmaya Vimaru. Amen. Yehi Shlam Rabba Min Shemaya V'chaim Alenu V'Yokol Yisrael Vimaru. Amen. Say Shalom Mirama V'yaseh Shalom. Alenu V'Yokol Yisrael V'Yokol Yisrael Devel Vimaru. Amen.
You may be seated. Before we move into our Kiddush on page 55, I wanted to take a moment to take a quick little dive into our Torah portion for this week. So, do you remember what our Torah portion is called, Zach? Okay, it's called Ki Tisa. And in any one Torah portion, there are many, many things sometimes that happen. Sometimes it's sort of like a long list of things that might be more or less exciting, depending on how much you want to dig down into the list. And sometimes there are many, many different things seemingly that are occurring that you sometimes wonder, like, gee, how do all these things fit together, and why do these all end up here at the same time? So to give us a little bit of an orientation as to where we are, several weeks ago we read the Ten Commandments, and we read the story of the Israelites kind of like leaving slavery in Egypt. They like finally flee, they're free, the Egyptians are gone, and they get to Mount Sinai, and Moses goes up onto the mountain. Moses has now been up on the mountain for a few weeks of our reading, and so while Moses is up there, Moses is getting like all of the Ten Commandments and kind of all of the rules. So it's in this week's Parsha that Moses will come down from the mountain. But that's not how we open. That could be how we open the Parsha, but that's not how we open. Zach's going to talk a little bit tomorrow about some of the things that happened at the very beginning. But what we'll see is like more instructions that Moses is getting about the census that they're going to take. Then we get some more instructions about some things related to the priests and some of the things that they need to do. We get some instructions about Shabbat. And then eventually Moses does come down. Do you remember what happens when Moses comes down from the mountain? Is it like a happy scene, or is everyone so excited to see him? It says like, welcome home, and they have like a big party. Is that what happens when Moses comes down? I see some heads shaking. No. What happens, Molly? The golden calf. Oh my goodness gracious, yes. So this is a very famous parsha of the golden calf. So we also read that while Moses was up on the mountain getting the golden calf, the people were not so patient. And the people thought, gee, it might be a really good idea. Like, we don't really know where this Moses guy went. It's really unclear what happened. Like, did they not think that Moses was coming back? Did they think that they were abandoned? Did they think that they were making a very nice present for God? And it's like, oh, we're going to be so excited to see Moses. We'll make this golden calf to welcome him back. Or were they like, I don't know about this God. Let's just make our own God. We don't really know. Do you have an idea of what you think? You think they were praying to the golden calf. A lot of people agree with you, let me tell you. So that happens, and then how does Moses feel about that? Is he like, cool, you made me a present? No, I don't think so. What happens, Molly? Okay, he drops the Ten Commandments. And there's a lot of commentary on that too. Does he drop it? Is it on purpose? I don't know. And then he winds up needing to go back up and get a whole other set. Because after all of that time he spent with God, he breaks the Ten Commandments. Kind of an important thing. You know, it's like you might have like a fancy vase in your house that your mom says, like, be careful playing ball around the house. You don't want to break that. Imagine breaking the Ten Commandments that just came from God. Like that's, I mean, put into perspective. Okay, so we have a lot of important things that happen in this parsha. And some of them are kind of happening new for the first time, right? Like we're finding out these, like this golden calf story. There's only one of them, thank goodness. There's a lot of things that we're learning for the first time. But one of the things that I was kind of struck by when I was reading the Parsha again this week is that after the bit that Zach's going to talk to us about tomorrow, after we get the census, we already got the Ten Commandments where God told us to keep Shabbat. Like Shabbat's really important. Y'all Israelites, like this is going to be an important thing in your life. Keep Shabbat. But then we have this whole paragraph, like right before God kind of signs off on the Ten Commandments. God, tells them to take the census, gives them some more instructions for the priests, and also like some instructions about how to sort of build this mishkan to be able to come close to God as they're wandering in the desert, and then kind of closes with a whole other section about Shabbat. So back in the Ten Commandments, God said you should observe Shabbat, keep it holy. Important thing, right? Here, though, we get the instruction a little bit differently, and it's kind of said in a bunch of ways. Here it says, not observe Shabbat, singular. It says, observe my Sabbaths, plural. And then it says that we have to observe these Sabbaths, that we're reminded that we have to keep them. If not, we're going to be punished. It's not just like if you'd like to, if you want to, if you think it's a good idea. Like, you're supposed to do it, or else you're going to be punished. We're also reminded that what that means is that we should be working for 6 days. We should be thinking about what we're doing for those 6 days that's different than what we're doing on Shabbat, so that then Shabbat is somehow different and special than the other days. And that we should, this Shabbat that we are engaging with in our lives is important because it's going to be a covenant, the sign of a covenant with God, this covenant that they're making in this moment, that God's sort of giving them the Ten Commandments, and the way that the people, one of the ways that the people will sort of say like, yep, we're in this with you, God, is to continue to observe Shabbat for all time. Okay, so, and Shabbat's kind of an important thing, right? Like we're here together at Shabbat, we're celebrating that together. But one of the things that I was sort of wondering about is like, why do we have it again right here in this spot? Like, it seems otherwise maybe a little misplaced if like, why do we need this here? Why do we need this again? And not just sort of like a quick one-line thing, but why is it emphasized so much? And if we want to keep going with that, we can say, why also, when it's talked about here, is it sort of in the plural? Like it's Shabbats, like with like many Shabbats and not just one Shabbat. So why do we think we have this again here? Yeah.
There's a Shabbat every single week.
Okay, so in case the people thought that like Shabbat was like a one and done sort of deal, right? Like you have like, I don't know, what's something that you might only do once in your life? Maybe a bar mitzvah. How about that? So bar mitzvah you do once, and then you can say like, yep, did it. and you don't really have to do it again. There is a tradition that 70 years later, God willing, when you're 83, Zach, we'll welcome you back. And you can have like an anniversary of a bar mitzvah. We might have one of those coming up here next year. So that's a thing, but you really only have one, okay? But Shabbat, you're right, Shabbat happens every week. So am I supposed to be like, oh, we're celebrating Shabbat now, check, we don't ever need to do it again? No, we have to do it again. And we're encouraged to do it again. So maybe that's why we have it maybe that's why it says it in the plural, and maybe that's why we have it as a reminder here, yeah? Kind of an answer to both questions? Okay. That was a really good answer. I don't know if anyone else is going to have anything to add after that. But do you have other opinions of why we get this again here? I know. Good job, parents. Do we have other thoughts on why we might have this section here, like as like God's final word? You know, I think about this also as like, you know, if you were to, maybe if you're like on the phone to someone that you love, or you're sort of like sending your kid off to camp, like some of those like final things that you might say to them, right? Like it's not something probably that they've never heard before, but you still might say it again, whatever it is, whether it's like call me when you get there or have fun, like they're not going to have fun if you don't tell them to. But it's like something, there might be something that you just sort of say, or maybe there's something that's really important, like don't forget to take your medicine. You know, like there might be something that like you really need to actually remind them of. So whatever it is, there is like some reason why we get this here. And I think that you're right. I think it is in some way to emphasize not just the fact that we're supposed to do it every week, but also how important it really is. Because we are getting like a lot of rules from God, like here and then on really for the rest of Torah. And maybe sometimes it could feel like, oh, gee, there's like so many of them. Like, how do I hold all of them, like in the forefront of my mind and like in everything that I do to never forget any of them? And how do I make sure I'm always doing all of them all the time? And while we do need to kind of take care with them, you know, in as much as we can, there is something also really special about Shabbat. And, you know, I think that part of it is this piece that we get where it says, you know, as it's reiterating this, that Shabbat is supposed to be a sign of the covenant for all time. And so when I think about maybe one of the reasons why we have it here, especially in the midst of this moment where, like, God's up there with Moses, reminding Moses that the people need to keep Shabbat. And what are the people down there doing at the very same time? They're building that golden calf. So they haven't yet gotten the instruction to celebrate Shabbat. They haven't yet done that. But, you know, the same way that I said at the beginning of this service, that, you know, when we have an opportunity on Friday night, say, maybe to come together like this in a sanctuary and to take a siddur and say some prayers together, or maybe we're at home and we're lighting candles or saying a blessing over wine or eating challah, which is always delicious, or maybe we're just even kind of taking a minute at the end of a long week. You know, maybe like when our kids get home from dance, before we move on to dinner or whatever else we're doing, we kind of take a moment to just appreciate where we are in life and to have that as a moment to recognize Shabbat. There's lots of things that we learn that we're supposed to do or not do on it. And maybe those are meaningful to you, or maybe you've tried them out, or maybe you might like to try them out at some point. But recognizing Shabbat as a sign and kind of helping us to keep in mind the things that are important to us, the community, the values, the tradition that we have, that maybe when we do that on a regular basis, we, God willing, don't end up going so far astray as the people did while they were waiting for Moses, because we have some sort of signpost in our lives. I was learning with some students this week in a class that I teach on Tuesday nights, and we were talking this week about this idea of having sort of fixed places for things that in our lives that are important to us. And that when there's things that we really value, we find a way to kind of not just carve out time, but carve out space for them. Like maybe it is that Michael was with me in class, maybe we really love to do yoga. And so we're going to make like a special spot in our home that's peaceful, that has no distractions, where we can go and we can kind of be mindful in the way that we want to, and we kind of know that we don't have to plan in order to be able to go do it because we've carved out that space. Or maybe we really love to write or to do art, and so we're going to have a space where it has everything that we need, and we can go and we can sit and we can be creative, or we can do whatever we need to do because we have that fixed space. Sometimes that's really important in terms of space. And we see with Shabbat how important that is in terms of time. The way that we spend our time shows what we value in our lives. And if we can carve out time for the people and for the things that mean the most to us, then we are really living our lives to the fullest in the way that we want. But if we say that we value time with our kids or with our parents, if we say we value doing a particular thing in our lives, like being active or keeping healthy, but we never actually take the time to do it, then how much do we actually value that? To be able to look back at the end of each day and kind of notice what we value and how it is that we've carved that out in time or in space is maybe a gift that we can learn from this week's Parsha, and that when we do that, it's not only a gift for ourselves, but it kind of shows our commitment to the things that are most important to us in our lives and maybe even to God. So there's, a lot of people say a lot of really important things about Shabbat, and you kind of can't ever really stop learning about, the importance of Shabbat in our lives. But I think that I would, encourage us to maybe think about this question as we move through this Shabbat in particular, and as we'll, maybe kind of pass through that a little bit in our Parsha again tomorrow morning. Just an invitation to think about that which you value, whether it is space or time, and how are you doing in your lives with actually kind of holding those up. And if there's things that we might need to kind of shift as we move out of Shabbat and into the next week and on into our year, then, let's think about how to reorder so that we can begin to have our lives match the values and ideals that we might hold for ourselves. So, more on the Parsha tomorrow morning from Mr. Siegel. We will continue on page 55, and I want to invite Zach to come on up to help lead us in Kiddush.
Okay. Stand in the middle.
Yes, you don't
Now
fall
take
down.
the couple.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, Borei peri hagafen.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu v'shabbat kodsho b'ahava uvratzon hinchilanu zikaron lema'aseh v'reishit ki hu yom techila lamikra'ei kodesh zecher litziat Mitzrayim Hivanu v'charta v'yotanu kiddashta mikol ha'amim v'shabbat kodshecha b'ahava uvratzon hinchaltanu Baruch atah Adonai Mekadesh HaShabbat. Amen. Okay. We turn to page 56, and I invite you to rise for Aleinu.
Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon hakol, l'ateiv kedula liotzer breshit, shelo asanu k'goyei haratzot, ve'lo samanu k'mishpachot ha'adamah, shelo sam chalkeinu kahem, v'goraleinu kechol hamonam, v'anachnu korim, u'mishtachavim u'modim, Lifnei Melech Malchei Hamlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu V'ne'emar V'haya Adonai L'melech Al Kol Haaretz Bayom Hahu Yeh Adonai Echad U'Shemo Echad.
You may be seated. We turn to page 58 for Kaddish Yatom. And this week in our community, we observe the yard sites, the anniversary of the passings of Senta Bar, Arthur Belsky, Bernard Brenner, Jesse Einhorn, Helen Engelman, Katie Flick, Joel Gennett, Aaron Gorodetsky, Nathan Green, Myron Kaplan, Leonard Kessler, Abraham Cobran, Betty Levine, Clifford Nelson, Susan Rickles, Lillian Rosenberg, Daniel Paul Ross, Katie Sachs, Heather Schlosser, Gerald Searman, Louis Shapiro, Dr. Paul Solnick, Louis Stein, and Rose Zeitz. I also, as we move into Mourner's Kaddish, want to acknowledge the passing of Ellen Bernstein. Ellen was one of my teachers. Not person to person, but she is kind of credited as being the founder of the first National Jewish Environmental Organization, and with that, really one of the people who paved the way for the idea of kind of focusing on Jewish environmentalism in general. So she has been doing this since the 80s, and she's literally written all of the books. I did a project when I was in grad school and I wrote like a Jewish environmental curriculum for schools, and it was all of her stuff. I actually just went to a Board of Rabbis program with her in January. She has a new book that came out about Tu B'Shvat, and she talked a lot about the climate crisis, and it's a lot of Psalms. It's really beautiful. And that was just a few weeks ago. Her birthday was February 15th, and she passed away rather suddenly this week. So it is definitely a moment of losing a great teacher of Torah. She lived in Mount Airy. She recently moved back here after being in Amherst for many years. And if you have an interest in environmentalism and the intersection possibly of Judaism and environmentalism, I highly recommend anything that she has written. And it is a huge loss for our community. So she is in my thoughts and prayers this week as well. I invite those who are in mourning or who are observing a yard site to rise, along with all those who might wish to rise in support of the mourners or for those who have no one to say Kaddish for them. We're on page 58. Yitzgadal, v'yitzkadash shemei rabbah, v'yalma divra kirutei, v'yamlich malchutei, v'chayechon uv'yomechon, uv'chaye d'chol beit Yisrael, v'agala uv'izman kari v'imru, amen. Yehi shmei rabba mevarach le'olam u'lamei omaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yithaleh v'yithalal shemei dekudesha b'richu le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata ta'amiran b'alma v'imru amen. Yehi shlomo rabba min shemaya v'chaim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom v'romav hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. May the one who creates peace on high bring peace to us, to all Israel, and to all who dwell on earth, and we say together, amen. Well, you made it through your Friday night service. We will join together again tomorrow morning at 9:30 for Shabbat morning services as we continue to celebrate with Zach and his family as we welcome you back to the Bima as you become bar mitzvah. We have lots of other things happening in our community as well. There is High Tea with the Sisterhood on Sunday. I don't know if you can still register for that. Nope, it's closed. But have fun to all those who are going. And next weekend is our big blowout weekend celebrating 50 years of BT and BJ coming together, Beth Tikva and B'nai Jeshurun, and also celebrating our executive director, Valerie Hurwitz, who will be retiring after 48 years of working here. And we do have, I believe that dinner reservations may be closed for Friday night because so many folks have registered to join us on Friday evening for dinner. There was some talk of closing down the registrations for the dinner, but you're still welcome to come to the service and to the oneg after. But if you haven't, let us know that you're coming for any part of that weekend, Friday night, Saturday morning, or Saturday night. Please do let us know very, very quickly. There's always room for more, but it's good to know how many to expect because it turns out this room is only so big. I spent a lot of time today talking about, how do we set up this room? So it's a very good problem to have. But we're looking forward to celebrating with our community, and there's going to be all this memorabilia out in the lobby about, kind of looking at pictures and, capturing the memories of the last 50 years.
Do you know if we're putting that stuff out earlier in the week so people have a little bit of time to go through it and not just during the weekend?
I don't know if we'll be able to with the ECC in session.
Okay.
But that's a good question. I mean, but it will be out, I know that it will be out on Friday. So, definitely if you're here Friday for the service, I mean, it will be out at some point Friday, but there's dance on Friday. So I don't know if it could go out until after dance. But it will be out Friday and Saturday and hopefully Sunday as well. I mean, hopefully we can leave it up for a little bit afterwards. So yeah, it's definitely worth checking out. And then we've been talking about how to make some permanent homes for some of them now that we've gathered all of these things together. So we'll see what happens. But there's lots more also coming up. Stay tuned for, if you are not going away for spring break, for Saturday, March 23rd for our very Barbie Purim. And we'll also be reading Megillah Sunday morning. And we look forward to celebrating all that and more with you soon. So we will conclude our service with the priestly blessing, which there's a tradition to offer this blessing from parents to children every Friday night. But if you have people you love nearby and want to put your arms around them, I encourage you to do so. And then we'll have a little motzi before we head on out. May God bless you and protect you. May God's face give light to you and show you favor. May God's face be lifted towards you and bestow upon you peace. May it be God's will. Amen.
Amen.
Molly and Zach, do you want to come on up and help lead us in Motzi? Okay. Could I either do the whole song or just the blessing? Do you have a preference? The blessing? Okay. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Take a little piece. Take a little piece. Don't all take it at once. Just pull it off. Yep. 2 hands, yep. Shabbat shalom, everyone. And there's more challah up here, so feel free to come and get it.